This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Well. What even was that match? Welcome back to North Pod. We're here after a 30-point loss to the Saints. It was 34-64, and I don't know about you, but I don't know what to make of that. It was a really bizarre game. We're actually 4-10-34, and they were 8-16-64. So really inaccurate from both sides. Yeah, it was a really weird game. Bizarre watching. Let's jump right into the story of the game. And yeah, I mean it was skill error galore. That's what I've written down. Skill error galore. It was missed shots at goal. It was dropped marks. It was miscued kicks. And that's from both sides, really. It was particularly bad in the first half. And it did improve a little in the second half, but not by a lot. It was just a really strange game to watch. The crowd was, it was a small crowd, obviously, because it was a North Melbourne home game. But the crowd was kind of bemused, I would say. There was elements of frustration, but a lot of just like, what are we actually watching? Yeah, just a really strange game of football, and quite symbolic of where North Melbourne's at, I think. The Saints, I would say, played kind of a 1 out of 10 game for that first half, and they were still up by 2 goals or so at half time. And they improved slightly in the second half. They probably played maybe a 4 out of 10 game for the second half, but yeah, I mean, that was enough to get them across the line, really. I don't know that there were too many supporters that went home stoked with that from either side. I think, sure, I mean, North Melbourne fans were probably happy that we didn't get belted by 90 like we have the past couple or the past week, and then obviously that game against the Gold Coast. So a 30-point loss is, better than that. But even so, I mean, it's 34-64, so the Saints were still nearly double our score. Because it was a low-scoring game, it's still, relatively speaking, not a great result. So, look, much better. Saints didn't play well, we didn't play well, and maybe we can say elements of our pressure contributed to them not playing well, but I think in my heart of hearts, I know that's not necessarily the case. I think it was they had a bit of an off night and we weren't able to capitalise on that, unfortunately. But a better showing defensively from us, certainly. I thought we'll talk a bit about some of the pros and cons, obviously, but defensively we were a bit better, and we weren't actually as bad offensively. It was just finishing off the work was the problem for us, which has been the case. Generally, it's been more that we can't create those shots, and we still weren't creating too many, but we did spray quite a few opportunities, unfortunately, and could have, ended up with a more competitive scoreline. But as it is, we've come away with that 30-point loss, and I think overall that's not the worst result. I went to the match expecting to lose by 10 goals or so, and we've come away losing only by 5. So I guess we take that. I don't want to be taking that. I don't want to be satisfied with that, but I guess, at least the Saints fans went home thinking, gee, we would have loved to win that by a lot more. I know I was sitting on the train next to a few that were just saying, gee, I wish we'd smashed them. We should have smashed them. So I guess we take that as a little win, that we've upset, I guess, what St Kilda were trying to do a little bit. And we'll talk about some of the positives to come out of the game. Before we jump into the negatives and the positives, just again, a really massive thank you to everyone that's been sharing me out with people that they know and listening in and interacting with the show. I've been really overwhelmed by the response. This is the 6th episode, and it's been just some really fantastic growth. So thanks to everyone for getting the word out, and I hope that you continue to do so. And just subscribe on Apple or Spotify or wherever you choose to listen to podcasts. I'm a Pocket Cast app man myself, but you listen to the podcast wherever works for you, and give me a review and a rating, and then just get involved with the social accounts, which are mostly at NorthPod Show, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, whatever works for you. I'm putting it out there, so let's jump right in. And I always like to get my vegetables out of the way and start with the bad. And it's probably a common theme, but we struggle to move it out of defence with any conviction. Zeeble and Sheasel and McDonald got plenty of the ball, but were often going sideways. And when they weren't going sideways to an uncontested player, it was long to a contest. I really thought that we were pretty conservative with our ball movement coming out of the back line, which, to be fair, is probably, not the worst idea coming up against a Ross Lyon coached outfit. But it was just really rare that we were able to cut the Saints defence up. Our only real avenue to goal was if we were able to take a contested mark on the wing, which has not historically been a strength of ours. Certainly we were able to get a couple out of the stoppages, or a couple of score involvements rather, because the goals were few and far between. Goldie took a couple of great contested grabs. I can remember Steve-O taking a contested mark inside 50. But beyond that, it was really, it was not, our ball movement wasn't something to be writing home about. I thought it was almost a step backwards. We were turning it over in horrible places less than we have in previous weeks, but I thought we were taking the game on less. And as a result of that, that's why we ended up struggling to score so much, or partly why at least. We were just a bit conservative, and sure, maybe it meant that we didn't get blown out by 10 goals, but we found it really hard to generate good opportunities to score. Sure, like I said, it's a Ross Lyon outfit. If we know one thing about them, they're going to defend. And I thought, while St Kilda's disposal was probably worse than ours at times, their defence was really sound and made it really hard for our players to, have any consistently easy shots at it, I guess. So that's something that good sides do. They are able to work their way through a strong defensive setup, and we just weren't really able to do that with any consistency. So that's definitely something to improve on. The second bad just has to be Zerha. He kicked 0 goals 3, and I think he had one that stopped short of the goal. He didn't even make the distance. Dropped a couple of marks he should have taken. He had 6 turnovers, 3 frees against. It just wasn't his game. And after a couple of those things went wrong early on, I really thought that his confidence dipped, and he just didn't look like, he was second guessing himself, I guess, and thinking about things too long. He did tackle and chase quite well. So often he'd make an error, and then 30 seconds later you'd see him laying a tackle and winning a holding the ball decision. So his momentum and his energy and his want to play well were definitely there. Like you couldn't knock his trying, and he was having a red hot crack. It was just some of the errors that he made that sapped momentum out of our game. I think of we were getting a run on through the middle, linked up a few handballs. He'd given the 1-2 and then had the option to kick it from 30 out. And to be honest, like Larky was on short, but if you're 30 out on the run uncontested, you kick those goals, and just sprayed that. That was his absolute best opportunity, but that was that real energy sapper where you just go, oh my goodness, are we ever going to kick a goal? So that was the second quarter. He he was good around the ground for the most part, but just those finishing touches and marking inside 50 was a concern. I did make a note during the match that I thought maybe in the second half he should spend a bit more time in the middle where he's got less time to think about it. And from what I could see, it seemed like he played a bit more midfield time in the second half. I also, by the same token, understand why he maybe should have spent more time forward, given we were lacking a combat and we didn't have CCJ. We needed those forward players that are familiar with that location. So yeah, it was unfortunate, but he just had a bad game, and at the moment he's not an elite player because he does have these kind of games. Last week he was one of our best players, and whilst he was a ball winner this week, I certainly wouldn't be putting him in the best. His finishing wasn't on, unfortunately. The third negative. This is an interesting one. I mean, the midfield was thoroughly beaten. I don't think there's any two ways about that, and that's been one of our strengths lately. When I say lately, over the past couple of years, we weren't missing any, absolute jets out of the middle. Like Tom Powell's injured, but I wouldn't call him. He's not in our top 3 or 4 midfielders at the moment. But yeah, I mean, the midfield was beaten, even though we won the hitouts 48-18. So that's, I guess, we do know that hitouts doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the centre clearances, but generally, it gives you a better chance. We lost the centre clearances 32-26, and the centre clearances in particular is where we lost it. I think around the ground it was pretty even, but when it was that 3 mids versus 3 mids in the centre clearances, we were getting beaten, and it was just similar to last week against Melbourne. Sort of anecdotally, I thought the clearances were a bit more clean for the Saints and a bit more decisive, got them more ground. I thought ours were, a bit more fluffy, I suppose, and often I can think of a couple where we got the clearance and immediately turned it over and it was heading back towards the St Kilda goal. So yeah, the mids were a bit off. Cunnington in particular didn't have a great game. He was subbed out at 3/4 time with 7 touches. It just looked a bit off the pace, unfortunately. And we've talked about this a few times over the past couple of weeks. He's a bit off and on at the moment, and I think that's completely understandable given what he's gone through the past couple of years. I have so much respect for Cunners, and I'm not about to jump on him and abuse him or anything like that. I think he's a great of the club. I do wonder if maybe he needs a bit of, I guess, maybe he doesn't play every week, I guess. We'll have to wait and see. I want him in every week if he's playing well, but maybe this is an opportunity to have he and Greenwood sort of split the matches because they are such similar roles, and Greenwood doesn't appear to be getting a look with the younger looking unit coming through. So maybe there's something in that. Lazaro came on for Cunnington and only had 1 touch. I think he was in the centre bounce for maybe 1 or 2 and played a lot of half forward. So yeah, just the midfield, as I said, it's usually a strength. Didn't look great. I thought LDU was our best midfielder, and it wasn't a great LDU game. Goldie was good, obviously, and Griffin Logue was actually quite good in the ruck too. Considering last week I said he was a bit useless in the ruck, I thought he was serviceable. Filled the role. It's better than throwing Larky in there, I think. Hopefully CCJ is back in the next week or 2 and we don't have to be putting Logue in there, but I did think that he was pretty good. But yeah, midfield beaten, for us, I think that's a non-negotiable. We've got to at least break even in the middle if we're not playing sort of a top 2 team. So that was disappointing. Last negative, just for most of the game, I don't think we were able to capitalise on our solid play. And I mean, that's what happens when you're a below average side in terms of disposal effectiveness. I thought we were just sloppy. That first quarter, we had a fair bit of the play in our half and we weren't able to consolidate that into goals. Obviously, we went into half time with only 7 points on the scoreboard. So that tells the story of our effectiveness. But yeah, like I said earlier, just dropped marks, a lot of high rushed entries, not kicking to advantage, inaccurate kicking at goal. I do think we missed having another tall target inside 50 alongside Larky. I mean, Larky kicked 3 goals, to be fair, and Logue was there a fair bit of the time, but I thought he looked better in the ruck than he did inside 50. And a lot of the time, Logue was, up on the wing anyway, playing that higher sort of centre half forward role. So I think, it is what it is. We didn't have another option really, and I thought Logue did an okay job, but we did seem to, given how often we're bombing it, we need a taller forward line, I think. So yeah, it was just capitalising on that play. There's a couple, as I said earlier, that kind of fell short, and a couple of absolute gettable goals that we should have kicked, and we would have been a lot closer. I don't really think that we were in with a genuine chance of winning it for most of the match, but we were close enough that if we kicked a couple of goals, you always felt like we were kind of 2 goals away from being right in it. I mean, particularly as I say in that first half when neither team was able to score at all, that was where it was there for the taking. And I just wanted to make a bit of a comment on the umpiring. I don't know, like where North Melbourne's at right now, I think the last thing that we need to be worrying about is the umpiring. And I felt like on Twitter and at the ground there was a lot of complaints or whinging, to be honest, about the umpiring. And I mean, that's footy. I get that. Like, that's part of the culture. It's such a hard game to umpire. Like, no one's ever happy with how the umpiring is going. And I certainly have been guilty of complaining about it and will be in the future. But I just, for me right now, where we're at, I don't think we need to be worrying about the umpiring. I think we need to be worrying about how we're playing, because that's what's holding us back from winning. It's not actually the umpiring at all. And getting like worked up and frustrated about it just doesn't get us anywhere. And I think that holds to the players and the supporters. I'm not investing any energy in complaining about the umpires when we can't hit a target inside 50. I think that's where we're at. If umpiring is going to cost us, let's worry about that when we're actually a good football team. Which sounds ridiculous to say, but it's the truth, to be honest. I think we need to worry about becoming a good football team, and then anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest. That was therapeutic for me. Let's move on to the good, because there was some good things to come out of this game. The ends were good. Clarko alluded to it in his presser during the week, that it was maybe time for some of those younger players to get a chance, because the senior players, generally speaking, won't get it done, or some of the senior players weren't. And we had lots of ins. We had Jury in, we had Perez in, we had Bergman come in, we had Marnie come in, LDU came back. So it was great to have some of those younger players, and I've just kind of written a little bit about them. Jury, he had a solid debut. He looked clean. He wasn't overwhelmed or overawed by the occasion, I thought. He took a couple of good grabs. He looked like he, wanted to take the game on in the right way. He finished with 13 touches and 4 marks, so not a massive game. He did fade in that second half, but I thought early he looked good, and he should have had a goal, had a shot from about 45-ish out that didn't quite get there for the goal. So yeah, he looked likely. I'd certainly like to see him off half back or in the half forward line like he played most of this week again. I think he's worth persisting with and giving a solid 6 or 7 game crack at it. I thought Perez was okay. We've seen Perez in the past. I sort of know what we're getting with him. It's just whether or not he can take his game to another level. But he gave some speed and some penetration in his kicks. So it was good to see him back in the side and giving it a crack. I thought he was okay. Bergman similarly was solid off halfback. I would say unremarkable. I think some people really liked his game. I thought his game was fine. Not bad at all. Just I wasn't blown away by it, but I think he's worth persisting with and and giving time. I think with a bit of a bigger body and a couple more pre-seasons, he'll get there. So certainly happy to have him in the side. Josh Marnie's the interesting one. I definitely thought he was more impactful than Kane Turner, and he puts his body on the line every single time. And I think that's probably something he deserves some respect for. He's a smaller bloke, and he's got a bit of Lockie Hansen about him. He just will back into a pack even if he knows he's going to get crunched, which is it's admirable even if it's a little silly. He's quite a smart footballer. He knows where to be, and he knows what to do. He just doesn't have the physical attributes to be a really good player. He's small. He's not strong. He's not super quick. He can't kick a ball more than 40 metres, which is astonishing to me for an AFL footy player. But he does have footy smarts. He pushed up the ground a lot further than Turner has been and kind of got involved in half back, even though he was playing off half forward. I thought, yeah, he was surprisingly good. It's just for me around, is he the sort of player that's going to be on our list playing a game when it comes time for us to be a final side? I think he's an upgrade, but is he taking us there? And I think that's kind of the question that we have to be asking ourselves with all of these young players that come in, because it's well and good to say let's throw them in there, but how many are actually going to be there when we're winning or wanting to be winning a premiership, and how many of them are going to contribute to that? How many of them can improve to that point? So anyway, it's just something to think about. I thought Marnie was good. I was a little surprised he got a chance, but I was really pleased for him that looks like he might get a little run at it. So he was good. And having LDU back in the middle was a difference. He didn't have a wonderful game, but just if you want any North Melbourne player coming out of a stoppage with the ball, you want him breaking forward or even breaking to the side, because generally he's going to get it forward 50 metres anyway. So it was great to have him back, hopefully better for the run. Second positive, Mackay's best game of the year by far. And I know it's not saying much. He hasn't had a good year. He got injured and then has really struggled to adapt to the new game plan. But I thought he had a fantastic game. I do wonder how much of that is him not having to coordinate with Logue because Logue had gone forward. Because, yeah, he was just so clean. He had 4 contested marks, 10 intercept possessions. He was nearly back to that best from last year. He did a couple of horrific turnovers, or at least shoddy kicks that he's been prone to over the past month or so. But in terms of reading the play, reading the flight of the ball, and making the option either to punch or to go for the mark, I thought, yeah, it was his best. And it's just, it makes for an interesting conundrum in terms of him coming up for free agency around how much do we want him, how much do we want to keep him. Either way, we want him playing good football, I think, because either he's going to play good football for us and continue to, or that's going to drive his value up and potentially get us more back if he does leave as a free agent. As an aside, I don't think teams should get compensation for free agents. I just think it's a bit of the idea is that you're getting in, your players are coming to your side and players are leaving in free agency. I don't think we should be ever saying to ourselves, this player is a free agent, let's get rid of him for the picks. And I think that's how a couple of North fans are kind of feeling about Mackay potentially. I just think we need to be a bit careful around that, because it's all around, the devil he's a known quantity. And sure, if he was to leave for a big sum of money, we would get, a really high draft pick. But that's a roll of the dice. We kind of know what Mackay is. Keybacks like him don't grow on trees. And whilst his form to start the year has not been great, we know that I have no doubt that he could be definitely the number 2 and possibly the number 1 defender in a premiership quality side. It's just what we're putting around him, because at the moment he doesn't have anywhere near enough around him in terms of quality. So great to have him back in form. I think it's good for us either way. It'll just be interesting to see what happens with him towards the end of the year when those contract talks are starting up properly. Next, positive, this will be a quick one. Zeeble was immense. I know that he had a lot of easier kicking around the backline touches, but he marshalled the troops back there really well. He got involved both on offense and on defense. Like, he wasn't just chipping it around; he was impacting contests. He stood up for his teammates without giving away silly free kicks or 50-meter penalties like Simkin did at one point. He just had a really fantastic game. 36 touches, 18 marks, 7 intercept possessions, 8 spoils, win at 95% disposal effectiveness. He was just, playing as that halfback. He had a near perfect game, and it's just great to see the kind of form he's in. I definitely was one of those that was thinking this could be his last year, and if he continues playing like that, he's certainly got a couple of years left in him, helping to support these younger defenders coming through. So a really great game from Zeebs. Great to see him succeeding. I think down back is where he needs to stay for the rest of his career, because he's having such a positive impact down there. And the final positive, I just thought the raw numbers said that we were a lot closer than we have been in some other games lately. The inside 50s were level, 48 to 48. We took 10 marks inside 50, and so did St Kilda, but marking it inside 50 has been something that we've struggled with in recent weeks, years, months, etc. So to take 10 is decent. It's by no means elite, but it's an improvement on where we've been lately. We beat them in the contested marking game, 16 to 11, and that's a lot of Goldie and Ben Mackay. But yeah, normally I'd say that's an area of the game that I get a bit nervous when we're kicking to a contest, because it's not been a strength of ours. The one issue, I know I'm supposed to be talking about the positives, but there are the positives. We were level in a couple of key statistics. We only lost the contested footy battle by 6 or 8, so like it was a small number. But an issue that was the tackle differential is significant. We lost the tackles 47 to 76, so they had nearly 30 more tackles than us, and that is an issue. But I guess the counterbalance to that is we're aware of it. Like, there's no one here who's going, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that statistic." We're going, "Yep, that's a stat that we're familiar with." That's definitely good feedback for us. We know that particularly that pressure in the forward line is something that we lack at the moment. The ball just walks out of there. It's not being kept in there, and I think even in clearance situations, other sides have more recently been getting away with clearances when, a Cunnington might have got them tackled or pinned in the past. So, yeah, that's definitely an area of improvement for us, is our tackling game. The pressure, there's a lot of pressure acts happening, but we're not able to lay those tackles at the moment. So in order for us to take that next step, I think that's something particularly our forwards can work on. That is all the positive and negatives. I did tweet after the match and just ask for some thoughts, and I'm going to run through a few of those. I got way too many to talk about all of them here, but I'm certainly going to go through, I guess, some of the more interesting or provocative ones. I think, potentially some ones that I disagree with, because I think respectful disagreement is kind of, it's a great dialogue to have in sport. So, yeah, I'll go through a few. If this is something that you would like more of, like, definitely, hit me up in the comments or on social media, and just, if you want more of this kind of interaction from the audience, and I guess more question answer style, let me know. It's something I might be able to do an additional podcast, or add this in more regularly, but I'm just sort of experimenting with it at the moment. So let's jump to a couple of the comments. Patrick Elwood said the defensive system that's killed us the last 3 to 4 weeks was much better. All the ins were good changes, only 1 or 2 fast breaks. That's a huge deal to get that right. Our pressure was AFL standard, which it hasn't been, and the ins were all good changes. Jury was good. I agree with most of that. I think the defensive system did look a lot better. I wonder to what extent, it's really hard to diagnose, was that St Kilda trying to play slower and therefore our defensive system was able to work better? was St Kilda playing slower because we were pressuring them into playing slower and giving them less options. Certainly, our tackle numbers were not AFL standard, so that's something that we do need to address, and I talked about that. But I agree that in general, certainly that defensive system looked like it stood up, so that's good to see. There's a few like Thinker and Rousseauit that are wondering whether Cunnington should go back to the VFL and find some form. And look, I get that perspective. I agree that Cunnington didn't have a great game on the weekend. And I think there will come a time where perhaps Clarko has no choice but to drop him, given he's been subbed out twice now. But I do think he's got a couple more credits in the bank. Greenwood's waiting there if we want sort of a ready-made replacement. But again, Cunnington is a legend of our club. And given what he's gone through over the past couple of years with cancer, I don't think we can say, all right, he's had sort of two quite bad games. Let's cut him. Let's not forget that we're not competing for a premiership this year. It's if we lose a game because we've kept the faith in one of our legends, I think that's okay. We need some bigger bodies in that midfield. It can't all be kids. Sure, I get that there comes a tipping point, like Clarko's used that language before, where maybe it's time to start thinking about moving him on, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Brent King says it gets walked out of our front half time and time again. It hits the deck and it's gone. We need a point of difference there. It gets there enough. Maybe Sheasel and Spice are forward next week. And this is one of those ones where I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think I don't want to ruin what Sheasel's doing down back. I think why, make him learn something new right now. Let's give him most of the year in the back line so that he can really consolidate that part of his game. I have no doubt that he's going to be a great player wherever we put him in the future. I just think for such a young player, let's not put more on him than we need to. There's no reason why he can't play that Nick Dacos-like role this year and nail that. And I don't really want to ruin his mojo. And Spicer, look, I know there's a lot that want to see Spicer again. I have concerns around him at AFL level. I think that Spicer will get a chance at some point this year. He has pace, and that's about it. I don't know that he is going to add that extra level of pressure that we're looking for in the forward line. I think he's not a strong tackler. He can chase, but his pressure's not as elite as some of those other small forwards and that's why he's not getting a game. So, look, I'm happy to stick with Marnie for a little while and see how that goes. I don't think either of Marnie or Spicer are the long-term future, but they're what we've got, I guess. So we've got to see what we can do with them. Benny says that Mackay looks like he wants to be anywhere but on the footy field. And I've seen a couple of people kind of allude to that. I don't know. Like, as I said, his intercepting was really good. And his disposal wasn't fantastic. And from where I was sitting, it's hard to see kind of, his more subtle body language, but I thought that he looked okay in terms of his demeanour this weekend. I just think it's a dangerous game to be playing, reading players' body language on the ground when they're playing in a losing side. Yeah, I don't know. It's not much of a thought really, but I wouldn't be so sure that he's feeling that negatively, I guess. Graham King says all scheduled training should be cancelled this week and everyone should spend every minute of every session kicking for goals. Can't win if we can't kick more than them. I get your sentiment. Obviously, a bit of exaggeration. I think it's not just goals though. It's field kicking. I think skills and foot skills in particular is something that we really lack in terms of that classy foot skills of other sides. So many of our kicks are just 10 or 20% off. So that I think comes back to the level of talent on our list, but within that, you can improve skills. We've seen it time and time again, depending on what kind of coach comes into a side. and the kinds of kicks that sides being asked to pull off. All of a sudden, a side with horrible skills looks like a side that's all right. And I think our game plan against the Saints kind of allowed us to be a more conservative side and look like at times a better side than we are. But we've seen also earlier in the year, we've seen those times where we've tried to bite off way more than we're capable of at the moment, and we look awful. So I think, yep, let's work on the goal kicking, and I'm sure Zerha will be working on that this week. But I mean, let's not stop there. I think all of our defenders and midfielders could really do with some, how do I hit a target 40 meters away who's on the move? How do I hit a target 20 meters away that's stationary, but I've got to really hit him with a low, fast ball, not one that's going to be intercepted by the opposition. That's where we're at, unfortunately. Dale Equid, I think it is, could do without Simkin braid fades. Zerha kicked straight and we are level at half-time. Mackay was very, very good. Need a lot more out of Taylor and Scott. Can't see them remaining in the 23 once Powell and Wardlaw are up and going. Zeeble gets another year, no question. A fair bit to unpack there. Most of that I agree with. I thought Simpkins' brain fade, was disappointing. I think it was maybe a GPS unit that he threw away that resulted in the 50-metre penalty. I couldn't really, obviously I didn't see it on TV, but it looked like that's maybe what he threw away. It was a bit unclear. That was unnecessary. The Curtis Taylor and Bailey Scott comment is an interesting one. I think they're players that, generally speaking, I've quite liked over the past couple of years. In particular, Curtis Taylor, I think possibly because he's done some flashier things, I've been more inclined to support him, I guess. In reflecting, I think they kind of fall into that same category as a Jack Marnie, in that are Bailey Scott and Curtis Taylor going to be there when we're hoping to compete for a premiership? And I think for me, that's still a question mark. Right now, I'd say Bailey Scott has probably got more of a chance than Curtis Taylor, but he didn't have clean hands on the weekend at all. So that is a concern. And you're right. I mean, Curtis Taylor does a couple of flashy things. He runs hard. I just don't know that he gets enough of the footy, and that's kind of a common concern for me with North Melbourne. I just don't know that we have enough of those smart players who know where to be, who can rack up disposals like Sheasel, because they know where to be. Like, it's really hard to teach that. Really, really hard. So I take your point. Powell is one of those players that generally knows where to be. Wardlaw is going to be exciting when he eventually comes in. And Zeeble gets another year, no question, for sure. Let's look for just one more to finish off on. Brian Law, I'm not sure, I think I'm saying that right, would love us to pick up a marking target in the mid-season draft. Bombing the ball and like his head doesn't work. Someone like Claremont's Jack Buller would have to be in the draft. Some of the kids looked okay. Perez and Bergman both need to play the rest of the year. Thank you, Ryan. I agree with Comben out. Obviously, Braden George isn't going to play all year. I could see why you might want another marking forward. I think it's important to remember that we've got that marking forward as an option in the future, just not for this year. I honestly think if we've got Coleman Jones or Comben in the side, we're okay for marking forward. They've both been a little injury prone, so we got to see that for about 15 minutes against Melbourne. What that looks like with all three of them. But you're right that the bombing's definitely not working, so we agree there. I haven't seen any of Jack Buller, so I guess that's something for me to have a look into. But I mean, any player with talent is someone worth us considering at the moment. And yeah, I mean, Perez and Bergman can get a game for the rest of the year. I think, injury dependent. I'd like to see Goda get a chance as well, but Perez looks okay. Again, I think, this is where my issues around our list, I just keep saying to myself, but are Perez and Bergman in a premiership side for us? And again, it's a question mark leaning towards no. And maybe that's negative, But I think that's kind of where I'm at now. Like, instead of going, let's be competitive this week, I'm saying, is this player going to be in the best 22 of a side that's winning the premiership? And I know it's hard to project these things into the future because that's what player development is. But yeah, I guess that's something I think about at the moment. All right, let's have a look at just the news from the week and then a quick look ahead to next week. Not a heap of news. Obviously, the VFL team had a good win against Sandringham, won by about 10 goals or so. Had a couple of good players. Eddie Ford kicked 3 goals, which is good that he's found a bit of form as he's been quiet lately in the VFL. Cooper Harvey kicked 4, so that's good to see him hitting the scoreboard. I mean, Aaron Hall had 33 touches, but we know that he's a ball magnet. It's just what he does with it. So Taron Thomas was back for a VFL game. Not super busy. Had 19 touches, and I think he sort of rubbed the grease off, so to speak. I think he'll be better for the run, and I guess it's good to have him back. I'll talk about him in a minute. The others weren't. I mean, Phillips I think had something like 24. Greenwood had 19. No one else was an absolute standout. You'd think based on that, like no one's banging down the door. That's the first game that Harvey's really stepped up and done something significant. And similarly, Ford hasn't been in great form up until his 3-goal performance. So no one's banging down the door there. And during the week, Clarko, actually I think it was after the game, Clarko made the comment that Taron Thomas could be welcomed back to the AFL group in the next couple of weeks if everything goes right. I hope that's the right call. I hope he's saying and doing the right things internally. He is a player with tremendous talent, but I'm in no rush to get him back into the side. I think we've got to make sure we get that culture right. And he is one of those players where I could absolutely see him in terms of his skills being in our best 22 in a premiership side, but not at the cost of our culture and not at the cost of the sort of standards that we're trying to set as a football club. So I hope he is on the right track. I think a couple more games in the VFL to blow the cobwebs off, and if everything's going well, it would be great to see him in the AFL, but I really don't want to rush him back in under the circumstances of how he's behaved over the past couple of years. Port Adelaide is our game on the weekend on Saturday afternoon in Hobart, so it should be a cold and windy affair down in Tassie. We always tend to play pretty well though at Blundstone, so it should be interesting. Port Adelaide, I'm sure, haven't played down there much, if at all, so that should be good. Obviously, it is the Jason Horne-Francis return game, and I know there's a lot of fans and probably some of the players that are getting themselves amped up for that, which is understandable, absolutely understandable. Just for my thoughts, I'm really burnt out on the Horne-Francis hate, and in particular the kind of Kane Corn link. And I mean, it's sounding a bit like I'm getting on my high horse like I did with the umpiring, but I just think we just need to not get ourselves worked up about it. Talking about him, and in particular talking about Kane Corns, it's just not interesting to me. I know that there's a lot of people that want to continually sort of have this Twitter fight with Kane Corns and talk about how useless a commentator or a media personality he is. But I just think that we have to realise that we're, like he's using us. Like, the more that we're complaining about him or the more that we're talking down about him, the more his message is getting through and the more, I guess, bang he's getting for his buck. So the less we talk about Kane Corns, the better, to be honest. I know that we all want to think that we're taking shots at him and telling him he's embarrassing and whatnot, but it's just not worth it. Like, at the end of the day, if we're talking about him, he's getting paid. In terms of Jason Horne-Francis, I wasn't stoked with the way that he conducted himself last year, but I also think by the sounds of it, our kind of treatment of him wasn't ideal either. And when you look at kind of how lenient we've been with Taron Thomas, I think there's an interesting comparison to be made there. He's entitled to go home if he wants, but I think we're also entitled to make him earn it this week, without taking his head off. Nothing silly. We don't want to make it that kind of situation where we get smashed by 10 goals, but at least we kept Horn Francis quiet. Like, let's win the game. Let's not worry about roughing him up too much. I think we want to make a good impression. We want to show him what he's missing, so to speak. But I mean, ultimately, like, he's playing for a better side at the moment, so we don't have much for leg to stand on there. In terms of any changes or things I'm kind of expecting from this game, I think our additions were good. Let's stick with that for the most part. I'd be happy to stick with a pretty similar squad. I think Cunners deserves another go. He's got those credits in the bank, but maybe Greenwood could come in later in the year if need be. I think if CCJ's fit, he comes in, but I got the sense that maybe he was more of a 2-weeker. We'll see. But it'd be great to have him back in just so that Logue can, go back to defence and do what he does best. Port have quite a tall forward line. They've got Dixon and Marshall and Finlayson and Teakle all sort of going through the forward line. So generally they're going to have 3 talls, at least 2 in there that are 195 plus. So I think it'll be important to have Mackay and Logue both back there if we can. And to be honest, I just want Logue and Mackay spending more time together in the back line so they're getting that practice and those reps working together, because that's something that we want working moving forward. Yeah, I think that's about it. Rioli looks like he might miss after that bump on Ridley. I think they're at the tribunal tonight, so as I'm recording this, that'll be useful. He's a bit of a pest in the forward line, so one less forward pressure player that's elite from the Port Adelaide side would be great for us. I just want a bit of an extended run with the kids. Let's leave Howe out. Let's leave Turner out. I don't need to see Hall in the next month or 6 weeks or so. Let's just see what happens. If we play the kids and we learn that they're not up to it, like, that's fine. That's information for us. Clarko can go into the off-season knowing that he's given it a go with Perez and Bergman and whatnot, and maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not. Clarko can make those assessments around who do we need to kind of stick around, who's good for depth, but who's definitely can we afford to delist and try and have a go at someone else in the draft. Is there one of these kind of players that's on the fringe that might have some trade value? These are all the things that we're going to kind of work out through the year, I think. So, yeah, let's have a go at run at the kids. If a Howe or a Turner or a Hall ends up as a sub, that's fine, I think. The sub, I'm happy to be throwing out to those kind of players. I thought having Lazaro as the sub, he came and only had 1 touch. It's really hard for a young player to have a decent impact as the sub, I think. So hopefully Lazaro gets a run at a full game in the next couple of weeks. He's another one of those ones where I don't really know where he sits, but I think he deserves a go at it. And yeah, I think that's it for the podcast. Hopefully we can go down to Hobart and put on a good show, and if we would only lose by 5 goals again, I think honestly I'd be pretty happy with that. Yeah, so thanks for listening again. Hit me up on Twitter at NorthPodShow. Follow all the socials there. Make sure you're subscribing, reviewing, liking the podcast. And yeah, I'll see you after next week's match. Potentially release the podcast on Sunday. We'll see how we go, but definitely Monday if not. Yeah, go North.